What's up, everybody? My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and this is Hard Knox Talks. Today's guest, it's been a long time coming. She is world-renowned for her work in the Canadian Standard of Psychological Health and Safety at Work. Her other works include Guarding Minds at Work and My Workplace Health, and they are revolutionizing the way we look at mental health in Canadian workplaces. When I have a scary dream, she's the first person I want to call, and we are going to meet her right after this.
I spent 23 years living in addiction. 16 of those years I worked as a Red Seal tradesperson in Saskatchewan and Northern Alberta. During that time, I made many mistakes and took more than a few hard knocks. I went from tradesman to business owner to hiding from gang members and dumpster diving. But with that lived experience, I've decided to try and make a change. I've dedicated my life to raising awareness and promoting change in the fields of substance use and psychological health and safety. So join me and my guests as we take off the blinders around mental health in our communities and at work and shine a light on what's working and what's not working in the fields of mental health and occupational health and safety. I'm Daniel Unmanageable, and I'll be your host, and this is Hard Knox Talks.
Okay, so let's bring her on. Hello, Dr. Samra.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Oh, well, I'm having a little bit of tech struggles, but I'm starting to get used to that. My tower is from 2013, and it snorts a little bit when I start running green screens and stuff like that. So we'll get through.
our modern age and our new work environment challenges, hey?
You know, and I say this every week. I think it would be more strange if something didn't go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we got to be resilient in the face of technology, right? Our new normal.
Absolutely.
That we're in.
Yeah, we shall forge on. So, in my intro, I talk about why I do what I do. What drove you to focus on mental health in the workplace?
Oh, great question. I first of all, since the time I was a very young girl, I was told, actually, because too young to remember, but my parents would tell me that I would always say, I want to be a doctor when I grew up, and I wanted to take care of them when they got old. And the fun factoid is I used to also pass out if I pricked myself and saw a little bit of blood anywhere. So the medical route was certainly not a good match for me for lots of reasons. And I go back and I my first volunteer job, I remember marching into, I think I was all of about 12 years old, this senior citizens home that I used to walk by on the way home from school. Didn't tell anybody, didn't tell my parents. I just walked in and said I wanted a volunteer job because I thought it'd be fun to work with senior citizens. And while I was there, that Tuesday after school became the highlight of my life for so long. I became so interested in the power of storytelling and the importance that people that were in their later years and had very few people in their life that were connecting with them just wanted to share their story, good, bad, and ugly. And that actually first ignited my passion. And then myself, like many of us, have gone through my own experiences of adversity in the background. And it was something that I'm of South Asian background was never really talked about in our culture or community. And so there was this kind of stigma around this topic that fascinated me because as I got older, I realized, my goodness, we all have a story we want to share and tell. And that laid the path for me just declaring I was going to do my PhD in psychology, not quite knowing how long it was going to take. And here I am.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's dive in. So on my own journey, I too love telling my story. It's very therapeutic, and I find that it's actually one of my greatest assets. But a part of my story is being treated unfairly at times. in the workplace, and not always from a stigmatic point. I had some really good employers, but with the lack of resources and education, they simply didn't know what to do with mental health challenges at the time. So what are some signs employers can look for to ensure that they're not being negligent when it comes to dealing with someone's mental health challenges?
Really good question, because the reality is, while we understand mental health and substance use better today than we certainly did 20 years ago when I started my career, we have a long way to go. And a lot of organizations still today struggle with exactly that same question. There's a few things to keep in mind. One is for us to recognize, first and foremost, that mental health issues, anxiety, depression, substance misuse, the most common mental health issues, exceed exponentially the presence of any other physical health issue. So our data will tell us, the World Health Organization for years has already declared mental health issues, which are all inclusive of a range of areas, is being the leading cause of worldwide disability. We also have had this fun little thing called a pandemic that we encountered that has taken the stats of 1 out of 5 people a year that are dealing with mental health and doubled that to 40%. So first and foremost, I'd say 40% of your workforce this year is going to deal with anxiety, depression, or substance misuse. So one is recognize this is common. Recognize that most of us are already going to intuitively know what those signs are from our own experiences. Maybe we haven't met a diagnosable condition, but we know that feeling when the proverbial wheels start to fall off, right? So what are the signs and symptoms we look for when we're not ourselves, when we're not showing up, presenting, interacting, relating in the way that we normally do, when we are overwhelmed, when we are unable to meet the things that we normally have been able to meet in terms of obligations, work and personal and social and recreational, that those are often the very first signs that we notice. And we can notice those in our work environments just the same as we can in our personal environment. So be attentive to changes from the norm.
Yeah. How can a good psychological health and safety program play into a company's risk management strategies when there are concerns of mental health challenges?
Well, I'm very proud to say that Canada is the first and continues to be the only country that has a national best practice around psychological health and safety in the workplace. So one of the
Thank you. By the way.
Thank you. I've been very proud to be so heavily involved and to be a founding and ongoing member of the CSA Technical Committee that's created the standard. So the first and foremost is there are employer obligations. And so if organizations understand, one of the best risk mitigation measures is follow the obligations that are outlined. And we now have and have had for a number of years some very comprehensive direction that tells us what our obligations are within our work environment when it comes to addressing and protecting mental health of our workers.
Yeah. How can emotional intelligence play into all of this, particularly when we speak of disability management?
Yeah, emotional intelligence is so key. It is one of the most important contributors to what we call psychologically safe leadership skills. And so what we know is when we are looking at any management of a process within an organization, so whether it's, of a disability management system, whether it's managing a direct report, whether it is being the leader or owner operator within an organization, what we need to recognize is that there are important steps that we need to be taking from an intentional and a conscious and a thoughtful standpoint. And so part of that process is self-awareness. And so emotional intelligence, the core elements are self-awareness of our own emotions, our triggers, our own biases, our own limits, things that get in the way. Biases and stereotypes and attitudes that we might hold that get in the way of effectively supporting people. And the reality is we know that there continues to be a good amount of stigma, unfortunately, around mental health and substance use issues. And so that is the very first key part, is understand what your biases and limits are. Number two, is to be able to effectively communicate with another. So if we think of that core of emotional intelligence, to be able to know how to relate to a person that is in emotional or life pain while they're going through a very difficult thing. When anyone's in a situation where they need to leave work or cannot perform work environment responsibilities, that is massively impactful on our confidence. And if we come to that from a place of empathy and understanding, we can be immensely more successful.
Yeah. When, listening to you to answer that, a question comes to mind. Do you think that there's a high value on lived experience with mental health challenges when it comes to addressing these issues in our workplaces? Like for example, would a supervisor with say 10 years lived experience with anxiety, depression, or substance misuse be of a benefit there?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, two things. There's the more formal kinds of peer supports that we can get in organizations. And a lot of evidence that tells us that when we're putting in peer support models, where we're engaging those that have lived experience to be able to provide support and advice and direction within our organizations, very good efficacy on that for lots of obvious reasons, right? Someone can have a relatability to an experience, often in a different and more helpful way. There's also then the small disclosures that we all do. And I'm going to step back to the stats. I'm a research scientist. So if 40% of us are going to deal with something this year, one is most of us aren't going to get a diagnosis, right? But we're just going to figure life out on our own. But if 40% of us are dealing with something every year, we live long enough, every single one of us, 100% of us is going to deal with mental health issues through our life. Again, most people just won't come see somebody like me because I'm not covered under the public healthcare system.
Yeah.
But that's part of life. And so the reality is most of us are going to have some experience of lived experience. And one of the things, especially from a leadership standpoint, that is so critical and contributes to psychological health and safety is us being vulnerable and authentic leaders. And vulnerability involves being able to share those struggles. So if I'm working with you, Daniel, and I see you struggling, and I know you're going through whatever life situation is happening, let's say I have a little bit of information. Sometimes we need to connect at a human level to say, Daniel, I get it. When I went through the death of my family member, here's what was happening for me. I was overwhelmed. I was this. Do you see what I'm meaning? Is I can start to give you a small disclosure. I'm not sharing intimate details, but I'm relating to you at a human level. And I think that is a responsibility that all of us have within our lives and our work environments.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I think stigma gets in the way of that a lot in the workplace. How can we, what are some ways that we can reveal unconscious bias or stigma towards people who are struggling with mental health challenges, but also to the people who would otherwise disclose that they have had in the past? Like somebody might be able to help me, but they don't want to say anything because of the stigma around mental health. How can we reveal those biases and address them?
Yeah, two important things that we want to do. One is to recognize that we have two main categories of stigma. There's self-stigma, so that's stigma that we hold for ourselves, and then other stigma. And so first and foremost is we want to self-reflect, and we want to understand what are our all as individuals, thoughts, beliefs, biases. What do we think about mental health? What do we associate with that? What's been our experience over the years? Good, bad, and ugly, right? Like just attitudinally is examine what you think about it. So interesting, there's some survey data that came out some number of years ago that asked people to list all the different things that they think contributed to someone developing a mental health or substance use issue. 94% of people will say personal weakness or personality flaw. Now, what stuns me is how high that self-stigma is, given how many of those respondents are going to have been dealing with a mental health issue themselves. So now I say this because ask yourself what your thoughts are. Do you think it's about personality weakness? Do you think it's about flaw? Do you think it's like, do you have those suck it up butterfly kind of attitude?
A moral failing, so to speak.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
then examine and ask yourself, well, think of someone you know that's had a heart attack or broke their leg or developed diabetes. What are the attitudes you have there? And explore those. Now, when we start to look at those individual stigma, including of our own experiences, right? Because we beat ourselves up about the stuff that we've done
Absolutely.
or failed at.
Nobody's harder on me than me, man.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
voices in our head are often more critical than any other voice we'll hear external.
You got it.
And I've worked in federal security prisons, so I can tell you your internal voices can be stronger than what you hear external. Like it's amazing.
I'd like to hear some stories about that.
Yeah, that'd be a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
Now, and then you self-reflect, and we go back to emotional intelligence. Have that self-awareness, because then what you want to do is then start to ask yourself how do I relate to others in my life, personal and work? What do I think about? Think of people that you know with substance use. Think of people you know with depression. Think of people you know with anxiety. Think about what you assume about what and why, and explore those in your mind. Ideally, if you have a trusted somebody, confidant at work or at home, have dialogue about this. And I say that because that's a first step to uncovering unconscious bias, is turning inward and self-examining what thoughts and beliefs and attitudes are.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found myself actually on many occasions in my own journey, in my recovery, that if I just say the things that I'm thinking out loud, oftentimes they sound like they're hard to say because they sound so silly, like I'll start to say them. I'm like, I can't believe I was actually thinking that and I was buying into it, So the value of lived experience and one person helping another and meeting them where they're at, it's truly invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great exercise. That's what I recommend to patients in our practice.
Yeah.
It's actually a CBT technique, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
One is take pen to paper. When we try to write out what's in our head, we're horrified sometimes at the words that we use. Yeah. And then I'll say, pretend you're talking to your best friend. Mm-hmm. Just pretend you're talking to your best friend, and you say it out loud, and we would never speak to other people the way. And those are two very effective techniques, actually, for catching our thoughts.
Do you ever tell your clients to burn afterwards? That's a ritual that I've done in the past. I'll write and I'll just get all the junk out of my head onto paper, and then I'll go outside to the fire pit and I'll burn it. And it's sort of ceremonial,
Yeah, absolutely. And all kinds of variants of that, right? And I think the key thing is we want to get the stuff that's out of our head and heart, and then we want to dispose of it. It doesn't have to be real. And so whether you rip it up, I'm a scribbler, like I like to write things down and then scratch them out that I can't even see them anymore. Yeah. And it's like done, or rip it up or burn it, like whatever resonates for you. And there is that feeling that, at the end of the day, Daniel, it's just words. It's a thought. Yeah. It's like neurons firing off, and I could imagine I'm a green alien right now. There's thought, me thinking it 5,000 times isn't going to make me a green alien. Yeah. Nothing against green aliens, because it'd be cool to meet one.
I'm pretty sure I thought I was a green alien once upon a time.
Yeah. but again, just think of the nonsense. If I say I'm a teacup, I could think of whatever nonsense. I'm just picking silly things here, right?
Yeah.
Thinking it doesn't make it real. And sometimes and we all know we can create our funerals in our head, right? We can imagine ourselves on our deathbed just like that. Yeah. That it is, once we can get that out, we can articulate it in some tangible form and realize that doesn't define anything about anything. We can think we're terrible. We can think we're failure. We can think we have a personality flaw. Well, the thought doesn't make it real. And there's something about getting it out and then disposing of it that shows us that's just nothing. I can do away with that just as easy as I brought the thought in my head that I'm a teacup or a green alien. Well, I can also say I'm a decently smart person, or I can say I'm lovable, or I can say I can mess up and still be a good person. And you see those thoughts, that we can control the direction that those thoughts go. And that can have a very important influence on our mental health and well-being.
Simple, not easy. But you yourself have begun to shine a light on lived experience in a big way. You have your own podcast, Tardigrade Talks. Why don't we talk just a few minutes about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into getting a podcast off the ground was certainly a dream of mine. And if I go back to storytelling, right? And I think at the end of the day, I still have a very tiny patient practice myself, but I oversee a team of clinicians throughout the province of BC. We, see hundreds of clients a month. And at the core, we think, what is therapy about? It's sharing our story, sharing our unfiltered story in a way that we can gain understanding and perspective. And, ideally, if we have the right therapist, a real unconditional, non-judgmental understanding of what we've gone through. And my vision for the podcast was to share inspiring stories of personal and workplace resilience and have people share the hard stuff that we don't talk about at our pre-COVID cocktail parties or our, water coolers at our offices that we're missing these days, right? And we just don't conversationally talk about the crappy stuff that happened in life. And yet, a third of us have gone through adverse childhood experiences. 1/3 of us have dealt with really awful, crappy stuff in our background. That's the stats. And then we start to add on experiences as we grow into our teens and older. You start talking to anybody. We've all got a story to share. So I've been very blessed to have just some absolutely amazing, inspiring guests really share openly their hard challenges and struggles with substance use and depression and cancer and suicidality and racism.
So I had to Google the name. Like I like Tardigrade Talks. I'm like, what the heck does that even mean? So I Googled it. Why don't can you tell us a little bit about why you chose that name?
I can. So Tardigrade.
It's wonderful. I love it.
Thank you. Yes. And so tardigrade is the most resilient little microorganism on the earth, and it can survive in all kinds of extreme states, extreme deprivation of water. It could be in like 200 degrees Celsius or minus 100 degrees Celsius. Tardigrades are resilient beings, and the intent was to capture just something a little catchy that captured the immense resilience that we all have internal. And so tardigrades have been found in space. They've been found, like, they apparently have existed for hundreds of millions of years. And this thing that I thought, why have we never learned about this? And I think it just so resonated because the immense resilience. And I've worked in federal prisons. I've worked in child protection system. I've worked with kids and families that have gone through the worst of traumatic events and the worst things that we can imagine.
We could have a pile of conversations.
Yeah. And my goodness, the resilience we have to not just survive, but thrive through adversity is so stunning. It is so humbling. And I hope it's inspiring for all of us to realize, even when we are in our darkest days, that we can come through that sometimes even better than we went into things.
Yeah, that's incredible, and it's true. I know a lot of people that have gone through terrible things, and they're some of the kindest people I know.
Well, when you think of your resilience ingredients, if I may ask you a question,
yeah,
what things, when you looked at going through your range of experiences, what things have you found were most helpful to cultivating that resilience?
Acceptance and surrender. I can get quite spiritual about it, but oftentimes I would find myself thinking that I should feel different than I do. Angry because I'm angry, and I had someone come to me one time and they said, are you done being God yet? Thinking that you should, that you should know how that person was going to act, or how that person was going to act, or what that person did to you was wrong. Who are you to say what's right and wrong? You're here now. What can you do about it to live a healthier life? And I had to just realize that the pain that I have inside of me is actually my greatest asset now. The pain that I've gone through and the losses that I've endured have given me an immense gift to meet others where they're at. So I no longer want to be rid of my pain. In fact, if you said you could take it away from me, I would say, no, you can't have it.
Mm.
You know? So finding that level of acceptance, the level of what is, how can we use it?
Love
And
it.
that's where how I got here today.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, that road, is it, Daniel? It's
Oh no, it is not
twists
easy.
and bumps and turns and some falls along the way.
Yeah. One step forward, two steps back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it does get better.
You're channeling it into something to help others. And
yeah, you know, an example I might use is when I came into my program of recovery, everyone talked about ego and how we need to be rid of it, and I assumed that my desire to be in front of people was ego. You know, and I wanted to, and I should be rid of it. I should be rid of all of that. And I came to a point where, okay, well, I can't get rid of this desire. So I accepted it, and I just thought differently about it. I thought differently about that trait. And I started using my words to help, and I started attracting attention. I started being loud and flashy and trying to bring people to a conversation that I think desperately needs to happen.
Absolutely. And I, you know, while the pandemic certainly did not start the conversation about mental health, what I believe it's done, because so many of us over the past year and a half have really, we've understood the impact on our mental health. In very unique ways. And the data will tell us that, right? That when we have something double, when the 20% per year prevalence rate becomes 40%, you think, my goodness. And I feel like we're collectively as a society and as work environments more prepared now, or more open to considering that we desperately need to have this conversation.
What a great time to have it. What a great time. You know, it's terrible that all this bad stuff had to happen, but it put us in a place where people might just be a little bit more willing to listen. So it's not all bad.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's another one of those things of acceptance. Okay, this happened. How can we use it? So we're just about out of time. So one of the last questions, I have two questions left. The second last one, what resources would you offer employers that have concerns about stigma attached to people with mental health challenges?
So a lot of wonderful resources that exist in the public domain when we're thinking about mental health and attitudes and stigma, and resources for employers more broadly. One is, I'd certainly encourage people to go to myworkplacehealth.com. That is our company, and we've been very intentional and thoughtful of linking resources that are public domain, aka free, and evidence-based on there. And we put out a lot of we have 2 YouTube channels, we've got resources, we've got blogs, all available at no cost. Plus, we've got links to a whole range of things, including our National Standard of Canada, to resilience resources, to workbooks, all things that people can access at no cost. So I'd say start there by looking at resources. There's also a fantastic site called Workplace Strategies for Mental Health. And they're very committed to putting out a whole host of resources around psychological health and safety. And I've been one of the primary research scientists that's helped contribute to some of the content on that site. And it's all free again. And so there's all the way from videos of people with lived experience, there's conversation guides, there's PowerPoint decks that people can download that can help them have a staff meeting around psychological health and safety. So those would be my 2 go-tos for people to go to.
Okay, well, I just put the link in the chat for My Workplace Health. So if you are listening and you would like to check that out, please just click the link. I'm sorry if you're watching from LinkedIn. I don't think that my comments can be seen in LinkedIn. We're working on that. Tech. What are you gonna do? So my very last question before I let you go, why are you here today on my humble little podcast with 4 people watching? I'm so honored with the work that you've done that you would just come to my table and sit down and talk with me.
Well, you're very welcome. And you just have inspiring story and background, and you're trying to do good things and make a difference and educate. And even if there's only 4 people, well, those are 4 people that matter immensely in this world. So my pleasure to speak with you.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Samra, thank you very much for your time. I will let you get back to your busy schedule. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and stay psychologically healthy, well, and resilient.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was awesome. Okay, let's go into the call to action. Please work. Please work. Oh. It kind of worked. Okay. With the addictions crisis this country is facing, the need to foster change is more important than ever. If you would like to help us give voice to this extraordinarily important topic, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Help us humanize workplace mental health by liking our posts and commenting your thoughts. If you would like to bring your organization into this conversation, please contact me at danielandmanageable@gmail.com, and let's get loud about addiction at work on Hard Knocks Talks. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.